One night, a college student named Eric, who was working as a pizza delivery driver, was tasked with one last delivery just before the shop closed. The destination was a house on the outskirts of town, an area not familiar to him and quite different from the usual delivery zones, characterized by its darkness and scarcity of streetleton. He entered the address into his gifts and set off. Upon arrival, Eric was greeted by the sight of an old, two-story house that had clearly been neglected for a long time. The garden was wildly overgrown, and the entire property exuded a sense of abandonment. Stepping out of the car with the pizza box in hand, Eric felt a wave of unease wash over him. Something about the house and its location felt oddly unsettling. As he pressed the doorbell, sounds of footsteps emerged from within. Slowly, the door opened to reveal an old woman who stared at Eric intently but did not speak a word. Eric asked for the payment, but instead of responding, the woman simply extended her hand, gesturing for him to come inside. Despite feeling creeped out, Eric stepped inside to complete the transaction. However, the moment he crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut and locked behind him. When he turned around, the old woman had disappeared, and in her place, a shadowy figure slowly approached from the darkness. Eric rushed to the door, only to find it locked. With his heart pounding in terror, he ran through the house, which was filled with strange dolls and old photographs, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Eventually, Eric found a back exit and managed to escape outside. But as soon as he did, he was forcefully pushed from behind and fell to the ground. Turning around, he saw the old woman standing there, with more shadowy figures emerging from the darkness behind her, encircling him. Eric ran with all his might and managed to get away. He called the police from a safe distance, but by the time they arrived, the house was empty, as if no one had lived there for years. Since that night, Eric has never done late-night pizza deliveries again. The terror of that night is still etched deeply in his mind, haunting him every time a quiet night falls, always reminding him of that house and the old woman. On a Friday night, Thomas embarked on a new chapter of his life. Fresh out of college, this was his first serious job. He worked at an old-fashioned bookstore on the outskirts of the city, dealing with rare books and ancient manuscripts. That particular night, Thomas was given an important task. He had to deliver an old manuscript about medieval sorcery, under a very rare arrangement to be returned just after one night. As the night deepened, Thomas drove away from the urban noise into a quiet area, guided by his navigation system to a location surrounded by forest and almost devoid of streetleton. Upon arrival, he was greeted by the sight of a decaying grand mansion, neglected and overgrown with vegetation. Thomas approached the mansion's door with the manuscript in hand. There was no response to his knock, but the door slowly opened on its own. The interior was dim and filled with a cold, damp air. Summoning his courage, Thomas stepped inside to deliver the manuscript, navigating through a maze-like interior adorned with strange carvings and paintings, his heart pounding with every echoing step. Eventually, he found a vast study room deep within the mansion, where an elderly man was reading. Upon presenting the manuscript, the man smiled eerily and whispered, "I've been waiting." As soon as the handover was complete, the mansion filled with strange sounds, prompting Thomas to dash outside. Once outside, the mansion suddenly began to glow and then vanished without a trace. Thomas returned to his car, gasping for air, only to find the navigation system no longer displayed the mansion's location, as if it had never existed. Nobody believed Thomas' story about that night. As days passed, he began to doubt if it was all just a dream. However, his discovery of a book in the bookstore, detailing the exact description of the mansion and the tale of its owner who disappeared centuries ago, confirmed the reality of his experience. The book contained legends of the mansion appearing for one night only to impart ancient knowledge to a chosen individual. Thomas' encounter was part of a centuries-old secret. This experience profoundly affected Thomas, leading him to a life different from before. He continued to work at the bookstore, embarking on a quest for lost knowledge, with that night serving as the key to unlocking the unknown. Occasionally, Thomas would reminisce about that night, pondering what might have happened had he made different choices. Yet, through this experience, he learned to accept his fate and live courageously. The mysterious mansion and the enigmatic man he met left an indelible mark on his life, symbolizing not fear, but the beginning of exploration. One late night, I was working on a delivery job. At that time, I lived in the Poconos, an area surrounded by nature and countryside. It was common for me to drive down roads encircled by trees, and this night was no exception. However, this time, I was driving in the dark amidst thick fog. While taking a shortcut to town that I had used many times before, I abruptly stopped the car when I saw a figure jump out from the bushes onto the road. The impact and noise at the front of the car made me realize I had hit someone. Holding my head, I couldn't believe the accident had just happened. Stepping outside to check on the person, I found a man in a black hoodie lying motionless beside my car tire. I was completely panicked, unsure of what to do next. Why was this man in such a place? And why had he jumped in front of my car? Then, something even stranger happened. I heard a scream for help coming from the woods. Someone was in trouble. The man I had hit was still lying motionless, but I temporarily left him to rush into the woods. I moved towards the direction of the scream, hoping to hear it again, but only the silence of the night and the sounds of night creatures filled the air. "Where are you?" I shouted. At that moment, I heard the sound of footsteps crushing leaves. Looking towards the sound, even in the dark and foggy conditions, I could make out the figure of someone hiding behind a tree. I ran back to my car as fast as I could, constantly looking back to ensure I wasn't being followed. When I returned to my car, the man I had hit was gone. Without a moment to ponder where he might have gone, I drove off. My heart raced throughout the drive, but I still managed to complete the pizza delivery. When I rang the doorbell at the house, a middle-aged woman answered. After paying, she looked past me and asked,
"Did they start letting you guys have delivery partners now?"
Confused, I asked what she meant. She said, "There's someone in your car." Turning around, I indeed saw someone sitting in the back seat. I used the woman's phone to call the police, and they arrived shortly after, but the person in the back seat had already disappeared. The most terrifying part of this story is that the police found a blood-stained knife on the floor of my car where the man was hiding. This memory still haunts me every day, and I genuinely feel terrified just imagining how things could have turned out if I hadn't made that delivery.